I was actually so late in making this video that even Kukikaze finally made his Endfield review. Whoops. But actually, his video talks about very similar things, so I highly recommend you check it out after this one if you haven't already. Also, Supa's video on what makes Arknights Arknights is also worth checking out, as I'll be talking about something similar too. However, I'll be taking a slightly different angle to this discussion. I'll leave both links in the description. There's been a lot of talk about Arknights Endfield lately, and for good reason. It's a highly anticipated game that's got the potential to be something truly unique within the AAA gacha gaming space. However, there's a certain subsection of the discussion that's quite negative. A lot of doom posting about how its mechanics might be flying too close to already popular games that have the ability to steer design decisions away from that unique product we've all been salivating at the chance to play. I've seen many people echo the idea that as long as Endfield sticks to the design conventions that original Arknights had, then it'll be fine. But what exactly does that mean? In this video, I'm going to be taking a look at Arknights and its highly praised design elements, then seeing how Endfield can take a page from its books to replicate its original success. But before we get into the meat and potatoes, let me introduce myself. Hello, I'm Cerulean Prince. I study game development, specializing in game design. I've also been playing Arknights since nearly the beginning and have been playing almost daily ever since. Even before Arknights, I've been playing gacha games for a long time, the list being a little long to list out one by one. This means my opinions and perspectives are going to be based on being a longtime gacha game player and my knowledge and experience in game development. That said, I always appreciate a good discussion in the comment section, so feel free to start one there. Now, without further ado, let's begin. Obviously, Endfield is a completely different game from Arknights, going from a 2D tower offense with base building and a roguelite to a 3D tower offense with base building and a roguelite. Wait. Going from a 2D tower defense tactical RPG game to a 3D adventure strategy RPG game was always going to result in drastic shifts in design. The genre is different, and gameplay is mechanically different, and the methods of storytelling are also going to be different. It's a whole new frontier for Hypergriff to challenge. However, this does not mean that the game design philosophy behind one game can't be carried over to another. So if Endfield must change that many elements, but we really want to keep that Arknights feel, what kind of game design philosophy should be used? To answer that question, we must take a look at what the Arknights game design philosophy even is. This is not a straightforward question to answer, nor will my personal answer be objective. Different players may have different ideas for what they think the philosophy is, because they have different priorities in the game, and they all play the game in different ways. But that's exactly it, isn't it? Arknights is a game that allows for a surprisingly massive degree of freedom to play in different ways. There's a certain compulsion for game designers to meet the requirements of making money in a gacha game by making it so that you need certain units to obtain rewards. This is why power creep can accelerate, making it hard to keep up with. Why teams must contain units that all use a specific mechanic to function well, or why new units come out very frequently, while leaving older units in the dust. This all culminates in a gacha game where if you're free to play, cannot roll units for fun. You need to plan around what unit will serve your existing teams the best, which units are more future-proof, and which are doomed to be power crap fast, and which banners to roll for weapons instead of units because certain units just feel lackluster without their signature weapon. There would be hardly any content in the game, so endgame becomes your sole source of consistent gameplay, so you complain that your teams are hardly able to clear anything, but people in the community would sooner call you greedy and stupid because you dare to try and have fun in a video game in more than one single way. Sorry, background footage completely unrelated. And this is where Arknights takes a different turn. The way its units are designed leaves a lot to be desired in terms of how you use them. For the uninitiated, the main Arknights gameplay are stages of tower defense. Enemies spawn from the red box. They will walk down certain pathways to get to your blue box. Deployment points, or DP, regenerate over time. Your operators cost different amounts of DP. You deploy your operators on either melee or ranged tiles depending on the operator class. There are 8 main classes split into various subclasses that all do a spin on what the class is supposed to do. When placing an operator on a tile, you choose a cardinal direction to face and voila, that's a tower that defends. There's obviously more to this, like a metric fuck ton more, but that's the gist of it. Each story chapter or event introduces a unique mechanic that you have to interact with to make your life easier. Most of the time, meta players just brute force it. Hey, if you do enough damage, who cares what the gimmick is, right? Okay, sometimes it's impossible to brute force clear without interacting with the mechanic. Enemies are also designed around taking advantage of or are disadvantaged by the unique mechanics, incentivizing players to form teams that can effectively activate or utilize said mechanics. Now, you would think that these mechanics heavily favor units that can do certain things, right? Enemies weak to physical damage, enemies weak to arts damage, enemies who lose their buffs when stunned, enemies who are invisible, enemies who lose health over time. These kinds of mechanics should be hard countered by specific units to incentivize rolling for them, right? Well, yeah, but only kinda. Most of the time, enemies can be killed by a lot of operators in the roster. Since there's only 2 major types of damage in the game, it's not exactly rare to have literal dozens of units that have that exact damage type. Physical damage operators are good against low defense enemies, and arts damage operators are good against low resistance enemies. But what if there's an enemy that's both high in defense and high in resistance? Here's where we could get creative. You could deal true damage. This bypasses defense and resistance. You could push it into a hole. You could debuff the enemy by lowering its stats. You could push it into a hole. You could stall the enemy until you chip it down. You could deal elemental damage, which fills a bar independent of HP but bursts with damage and debuffs at the same time. You could push it into a hole. And of course, this is still a gacha game, so there are still going to be those extra specific units that do a funny thing that totally breaks the enemy's intended gameplay experience. But Cyril, I hear you cry, what's the endgame like? It doesn't matter what kind of creative solutions you have in the game. If the toughest challenges are just clearing a stage within a certain timer, it's always going to be a DPS check anyway. Especially if they provide seasonal buffs to the modes, you're probably going to need specific mechanics on your units to benefit from those buffs anyway. Well, my Hoyoverse gaming fans, that's the neat part. There is no endgame. Okay, well, not in the way you're thinking of, at least. Arknights has completely optional endgame modes. Technically speaking, the common meaning for endgame in this context is a game mode that challenges well-built accounts. That's the baseline. Locking pull currency behind it is optional. Seasonal buffs are optional. Resetting once or twice an update is also optional. This is because what players are looking for in endgame modes is something difficult, something fresh, and something that doesn't get old. The difficulty can come from anything, but its most common solution is a timer. The freshness comes from giving you a break from regular gameplay into something more novel, which a side mode can provide. Not getting old is simply by updating the mode with something new every now and again. When you break it down to its simplest elements, an endgame can look like anything. But since the most popular gacha titles opt into doing similar things for their endgame modes, it can look a little tiring. In Arknights, the endgame modes can be approached by a mid-game account, but in order to fully complete them, you do eventually need a better account. I think this generally is the case for the other games as well. In Endfield, it seems that they're splitting endgame into 3 modes, one for exploration, one for combat, and one for puzzles. Whether or not these are fair or optional is something we'll have to wait and see. Other benefits to adding endgame modes is that it can be a good way to incentivize newer players to build out their roster in order to clear these stages in the future. Truthfully, that's only half the reason. The biggest reason is companies want to sell you characters. Yes, the game designers do at least try to make it the first reason, incentivizing newer players, but the main reason why the higher-ups even approved of investing resources to create and update such a mode is because it's a fantastic way to make a lot of money. Hoyoverse-like games want you to pull for certain characters because they resonate directly with the current cycle's buffs and effects. You could theoretically brute force it, but you'll need a lot of damage, and that probably comes with extremely high investment in gear and duplicates. The worst part is, they lock a wealth of pull currency behind it. This is a gacha game. It doesn't matter whether the game attached to it is amazing. It doesn't matter if the story is standout or if the gameplay is unique. At the end of the day, the developers chose to make this a gacha game. Gacha games are colloquially called that because its monetization tactic actually affects the game design. We don't call Genshin Impact the 3D open world adventure RPG, we call it a gacha game. We don't call Wuthering Waves a 3D open world combat RPG, we call it a gacha game. We don't even call Limbus Company a 2D turn-based combat from hell, we call it a gacha game. But why do we do this when the games attached to them are actually very good? Well, I just told you the answer. The gacha aspect shapes the game design. The game has to conform around the fact that you gamble for units, and that ultimately affects the overall gameplay experience. Some endgame modes lock pull currency behind these walls. Unfortunately, by doing this, you're telling players that this is an important mode that you should play. I'm saying this for people who dismiss endgame complaints by saying, you don't actually have to play it if you don't like it. I'm sorry, but locking the most important resource in the game behind this kind of challenge indirectly tells the player that this is content they should aspire to clear, especially if it's limited content. For example, even if a player's main priority is story content, that doesn't mean the developers aren't pointing at the endgame mode saying, hey, remember that really well-written character that you really like? They're on banner right now. Bonus points if they're strong too. Okay, so going back to Arknights, why can it survive despite making these modes optional? You see, everything I just told you just now, Arknights doesn't do. Gigantic modes like the roguelite integrated strategies or the survival crafting reclamation algorithm do give you a lot of material and cosmetics, but pull currency is not one of them. There is one mode that does that, and it's an endurance mode called Annihilation, but it's piss easy for veterans and it gives you like 3 pulls a week. In terms of challenging content, there are some story and event stages that give even the meta players a hard time, and only integrated strategies players know how bullshit fighting certain bosses in difficulty 15 are.
Do you still have another face? Are you not done? Oh. Hi.
But none of these cases are content that resets nor gives you the bulk of pull currency. Because of this, there is a lot less pressure and anxiety for players across the board to invest in pulling for many units, or even to invest too highly into units they already have. So how exactly does Arknights make money? I mean, if you don't sell characters, how do you make a profit? How do you break even? The answer is simpler than you think. Don't only rely on selling characters to make money. This is a gacha game, so the main moneymaker is always going to be the characters, don't get me wrong. However, Arknights sells enough skins and value packs that players also consistently go for other than the characters. And yeah, they also have a monthly pass, which not only gives you pull currency every day, it also gives you some stamina. That's extremely worth it. They sell packs from materials to straight up 6-star selector tickets where you can literally spend $30 to directly buy a single highest rarity character. Is that an excessive price? To some people, maybe, but the fact that they even give the option to is amazing. As money hungry as Hoyoverse is, do you see them sell 5-star selector tickets? No, their greed says no, because they won't let you directly purchase characters. You need to waste money for the chance to get them. And then there are the material packs. People actually consider buying these because they give a really good amount of valued materials for a really low cost. Do you have to buy them to build your units? Not at all, but the fact that it's an option also makes Arknights a shit ton of money. They sell so many skins that it's a statistical wonder if even a free-to-play hasn't been tempted to buy some with their premium currency. Wait, was that? Yeah, you heard me right. Free-to-play players have access to premium currency by first time clearing a stage and its challenge variant. Extremely accessible. Do you see this in big modern gacha games? No, you don't. Skins are also obtainable with only paid currency, but there is no way to get paid currency for free. And please, don't mistake me mentioning these other games as unwarranted slander or anything. My intent is to show you that even in the most successful titles, especially titles that Endfield itself is often compared to, there is a lot of room to improve the systems within it. These games are not perfect, and there's always room to grow. By giving players the choice to either spend their hard-earned money on gambling for new units, buying cosmetics, buying unit selectors, or buying material packs, you've just stocked the store with items that all sorts of players want to buy. If you limit yourself to mainly pushing for players to purchase pool currency or the battle pass or monthly pass, you create a situation where you're only trying to siphon money from players who want to gamble. You're not catering to people who just don't want to waste money on a gamble but prefer to buy something directly. I am one of those people. I think it's a waste of my money to gamble on a chance, but I have zero reservations about just buying a selector ticket. Compare someone who spends $30 a year on pool currency versus me spending $30 a year to get a selector ticket. Personally, I think it's more worth it to get the selector ticket, right? I don't want to spend money to get 10 pulls, so I would rather spend money to, I don't know, speed up my character building process. Do you see what I mean? This allows Arknights to rely less on hard selling new characters. And when the game isn't pressured to strong-arm you into pulling for the new units, they now have the flexibility to not add an endgame with hyper-specific buffs, or hold pull currency hostage behind a timed reset. A lackluster endgame is not the problem. It's a symptom of a larger issue, which I think is the over-reliance of selling characters. Without a resetting endgame, it severely decreases the fear of missing out. But this isn't the only way they do it. There are other ways Arknights reduces the FOMO aspect of a live service game. Let's talk about the banners. How does Arknights reduce gacha FOMO? The answer is simple. Distinctions, or colloquially yellow certs. This currency is not a new idea in gacha games. In Arknights, you get green certificates for pulling anyone, but you get special yellow certificates for pulling 4, 5, and 6-star units. It's functionally the same as Genshin's Stardust and Star Glitter. There's the common one you get from every normal pull that lets you trade resources, then the special one that lets you trade rare resources and even characters. So, what's the big deal? Isn't this standard practice for gacha games nowadays? You see, the difference is what you're able to buy. In Arknights, you can save 45 yellow certs for a 5-star, or 180 yellow certs for a 6-star. That's right, you're just able to flat out buy a 6-star with this currency that you can passively gain just by rolling on the banners that you were already going to roll on. Again, take Genshin for example. You are able to buy 4 stars directly, but they're the standard 4 stars. You won't be able to find recent units on there. And not to mention being unable to buy a 5-star, not even a standard unit, even if it was thrice as expensive. In Arknights, the shop rotates the available purchasable units every 2 weeks, going by chronological order of release, then about 2 rotations of reruns to older operators, and then back to the order of release, putting in 6 stars that haven't yet been in the shop. This means that your pulling plans for the gacha banners are flexible. You want both 6 stars from back-to-back banners, but you only have enough currency to probably only get 1? That's fine, you can wait about a year or so for it to appear again in the shop. Or if the unit you wanted to get is an older unit, that wait is shortened. Keep in mind, you gain yellow certs at a pretty reasonable pace. Of course, whales can benefit more from this in terms of obtaining more certs by virtue of being able to pull more, but the fact that even free-to-play players can literally redeem a few 6 stars of choice every year is a massive benefit for planning ahead. It's predictable too, meaning it's not a total gamble whether the unit you want to show up in the store will be 6 months ahead or next reset. It won't be a surprise. Additionally, you aren't jerked around by the whims of the devs holding a character rerun banner hostage for over a year while players beg for them to let them obtain their favorite character. Also, I'd be doing a disservice if I didn't talk about recruitment. It's basically a free permanent banner. You use a unique currency for it to pull from a curated but slowly expanding roster of units. Select the tags that relate to your desired character, then wait 7 to 9 hours and bam, that's a free pull. You can do this dozens of times a week, by the way. Think of all the certificates free-to-play players get to save for a 6-star. Next, let's talk about a different type of banner. Kernel banners. You know how the longer a gacha game exists, the more character bloat there will be in banners? Modern gacha games came up with a solution. Make every character limited, or at least a good 95% of them. Once a banner is gone, you can't get them until they come back. This is greedy and stupid. On one hand, yes, you won't bloat the banner pool, but I don't think I have to explain why this is really bad. Some games have a different idea. In Arknights, we've split the banners into 2. Units from the first few years of the game are only obtainable through this banner permanently, while all the newer units are added to the modern banner pool permanently, because most of its units are actually in the standard banner, meaning if you didn't get a 6-star that you wanted, it's probably something you didn't have already. While this does pose some issues, like a new player having to split resources to either pull on one of the 2 banners, or, God forbid, an older player who just hasn't gotten a desired unit from year 1, but is now stuck in a banner they don't want to roll on, I much prefer this as a compromise, as it does keep the integrity of the fact that 90% of the characters are not limited. Of course, a better solution must be implemented eventually, because I don't know about you, but I don't want to see a 3rd banner type to split the pool in year 10 of Arknights. Honkai Star Rail, yeah, I'm calling you out, managed to commit this sin by making their rerun banners go from 1 rerun banner per cycle to 2 reruns to sometimes 3 fucking reruns on top of the new limited banner at the same time. But yeah, they're both band-aid fixes to a larger systemic issue that, they just don't see interested in addressing. However, I feel more comfortable with Arknights because, like I said, there are other ways to get units. Alright, enough talk about the banners. How else does Arknights reduce FOMO? All of the events are archived. Except for extremely small 1-week events, every single major and side event is playable in the game. You can unlock a couple of them a week if you weren't around to play, you can get the rewards from clearing those stages, and you can even get the welfare operator as usual if the event had one. Oh right, welfare operators. Some events come with a unique 5 or 6-star for free, just by playing the event. Wouldn't that be cool to have in Endfield? This helps reduce any idea that it's too late to start playing the game. As a day 1 Genshin player, it always bothered me that they kept making such great events but made them disappear at the end of the day. Also, speaking as someone who used to play a lot of Destiny 2, their seasons, no matter how good or bad, just end up vanishing at the end of the year. It sucks. I understand from the point of view of a live service game, storage optimization is a huge thing, especially if the game is also on mobile. However, it's such a highly demanded feature that I don't think Endfield can ignore it. Many solutions have been proposed, namely an optional download feature where you can freely download or delete archived events at your convenience. But whatever the case, this manner of FOMO reduction is crucial in getting people to play your game. Let me give you an analogy. You know how some companies are using AI to replace workers to avoid paying so much money to them? but consumers look at AI products as something you shouldn't buy because they probably didn't pay their workers? It's a similar idea here. If you employ time-limited events in your gacha game to hopefully attract players to try the game, you're shooting yourself in the foot because people are less likely to try it because they know it'll go away. And they know that no matter when they start the game, events are gonna disappear anyway, so what's the point? Do you get what I mean? Sometimes these kinds of tactics just backfire and give the opposite effect than intended. I just think that archived events in Endfield are just non-negotiable. Wow, I've talked about a bunch of things, so let's recap. Firstly, the main design philosophy of Arknights is that you can play however you freaking want. The operator design encourages experimenting with different teams, and it never feels like you have to play a certain character in one specific team. The enemy design must be quirky and varied, offering unique challenges that cannot be steamrolled by a single team. There is no FOMO endgame, and whenever we do get permanent modes, pull currency is never locked behind its rewards. The damage ceiling is much higher than you will ever need, so you can actually get away with using low rarity options to make the game more fun or more challenging. The gacha will not be the only way to earn characters, as there are multiple systems in place to obtain the highest rarity units without spending a pull. They will spread monetization out to value packs and skins, which players will want to buy because most of them aren't going to be spending on pull currency. In addition, if the gacha allows you to obtain characters frequently, players will have excess money that they are willing to spend, and instead of spending it on a banner, they might want to buy cosmetics or packs. All of its major events are archived, and you can play them freely at your convenience. Finally, I think what matters most is making a game with love. You can tell that Arknights is loved by its developers. It's not an easy thing to do. I think a lot of people get this misconception that a game cares about its players when the devs listen to player feedback and give them everything they ask for. I mean, partially, but not entirely. Just because you get an extra 10 pulls doesn't mean the devs love their players. I'm just tired of hearing about so-called goated devs, and the extent of their goatedness is just buckling under pressure because a group of very loud people really wanted a specific thing and got it because the devs were afraid of review bombing or souring community sentiment. It's admittedly a more cynical perspective that I have, so this is just my own opinion. Really, what I think shows that the game is made with love is integrity. Sticking to design principles, doubling down on systems and mechanics that shape the identity of the game. One that has a very specific thing it's trying to be. And for the players who agree with that direction, they help the devs create this game in a mutually beneficial way. One example that comes to mind is Warframe, a live service game that is constantly praised for its close interactions with the players, and one with an active player base who kind of half-run the game due to its trading economy, and the ability for free-to-play players to earn its premium currency by grinding valuable materials and trading them. Gacha games obviously falls into a different category of live service games, usually unable to implement something like player trading or even garner that level of community love due to its inherently predatory nature of being a gacha game. But the ones that have the best community sentiment like Limbus Company, Reverse 1999, and Arknights, they all follow a similar pattern. They have a combination of fair monetization, intricate gameplay, and a well-crafted world filled to the brim with a colorful cast of characters that remain relevant throughout the story. You know, it doesn't matter if they have elements that are similar to other games out there. A timed combat challenge? Whatever. As long as that's not the only type of combat challenge in the game, or at least it's not that difficult to get all the rewards from it. A simple minigame for an event? That's fine. As long as you pair it with heavier content, I don't mind match 3 or a rhythm game event, you know? Limited units? So what? If the base roster is good enough to get all the rewards in the game, everything else just becomes optional, no? That's my hope at least. In conclusion, here's what we learned. Options is king. By giving the players more wiggle room to express themselves, games become a friendlier space to play in. It becomes inviting instead of restrictive. A game with a low difficulty floor to receive all the rewards, but a higher ceiling for skill expression. We also understand that a game needs to make money, but what you sell and how you sell it is important. Access to a variety of paid products, especially ones that are not the main draw like characters, puts the choice in the hands of the customers. Instead of feeling like they have to spend money on pulls, they could spend money on speeding up progression or cosmetics, without feeling like they just wasted the chance to pull more often. The additional income the game gets frees up room for the game to actually lower its need to push for selling characters, thus still making money while simultaneously reducing pressure on the side of the players. Of course, we're assuming that the devs aren't greedy, because if they are, then they won't do this. Then, newly added content mostly stays in the game, making it feel like it's worth it to invest time into the game as it grows. In essence, everything to do with keeping options available instead of strong-arming the player into obvious financial choices is part of the magic that keeps good live service games alive. I hope Endfield can become the same. With that being said, what do you think? What do you think Arknights' design philosophy is? Would you want to see them port over from Arknights to Endfield? Do let me know in the comments. Let's have a healthy discussion. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in more Endfield content soon. Bye bye!